Tennessee has won the All-Sports Trophy in the Southeastern Conference for the third straight year. So, Athletics Director Danny White is the best AD in the country, right? Oh yeah, that and more at your Wednesday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Wednesday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. It is your place for Tennessee Volunteers news and entertainment every single weekday morning when you wake up, wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate you guys making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. You everydayers are what make the show go. Today's show is going to be a busy one. Going to have a couple of guests on the show, but we're going to try to work through this pretty quickly. Joe Healy of D1 Baseball is going to join us in segment number 2 to break down the Knoxville Regional. A lot of great insight from one of the national writers that covers the sport of college baseball, telling you exactly what to expect from these teams in the Knoxville Regional. That is coming up in segment number 2. Josh Ward coming up in segment number 3. And then here to kick off the show, we're going to discuss how Danny White is the best athletics director in college athletics right now. That and a whole lot more coming up on your Wednesday show. You can watch us, listen to us, download us, subscribe to us, all that and more wherever you get your podcast for free. And of course, on the Locked On Vols YouTube channel. So, Tennessee has captured not once, not twice, but for the third consecutive year, the All-Sports Trophy in the Southeastern Conference. It's presented by the USA Today Network. Becoming the top athletics department in the SEC, meaning all sports across both men's and women's, Olympic sports, non-revenue sports, revenue-generating sports, take into account everything that comprises athletics in the Southeastern Conference. Tennessee stands at the top of the league for the third straight year. And it's no coincidence that this kind of coincides with Danny White taking over the acting athletics director role in 2021. Since he's taken over here at Tennessee, being Tennessee's AD, the spring of 2021, Tennessee has won 12 Southeastern Conference titles. In the 4 years before White's arrival, UT won only 2 SEC championships. So I think that, says a lot about where Danny White is. And now, has Danny White hired every single coach on campus right now? No, he's not. I'm not trying to act like that he hasn't, but he's what makes everything go. I mean, he's the boss, and he creates the work environment right now. And obviously these coaches are recruiting well and developing well and doing a great job. And some of these coaches that White has hired, especially in the non-revenue sector, and of course Josh Heupel being, the football, but they're all working under his leadership right now and under his guidance, and he deserves a whole lot of praise for sure. Tennessee, let's see here. The standings here for the 2023-2024 USA Today Network SEC overall sports standings. Tennessee at number 1, Texas A&M at number 2. Texas will be in this next year, but not in this rankings. Florida's number 3, Georgia's number 4, and Arkansas is number 5. That kind of rounds out the top 5 of kind of what we're looking at here. Tennessee's been dominant in obviously the sports landscape here for this academic year, and in fact, Tennessee joins Florida as the only school to win multiple SEC all sports titles. That's really, really cool to do it, for the for more than one time in the SEC. And Tennessee is only one of 2 teams in the conference that have done that multiple times, joining Florida. So that's really, really cool. You look at and again, we talked about this on the show a little bit, I want to say one day last week, but you see what Tennessee's done just this year overall. Volleyball, Sweet 16, football, 9 wins and a Citrus Bowl victory, which is really, really good. It could be better, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to set the standard short here, but 9 wins overall with a Citrus Bowl victory in football, that's a successful season, especially when you think it's a down year. Basketball, regular season champions, Elite 8. Softball, regular season champions, regional champions, went to the Supers and came up short. Baseball, regular season champions, SEC tournament champions, the number 1 overall seed entering postseason play. Women's tennis went to the Final Four. Men's tennis went to the Elite 8. Men's golf, first ever number 1 seed in the NCAA championships, finished top 10 nationally for the first time since 1981. Cross country, both NCAA regional championship, women finishing 6th, men finishing 26th after advancing out of regionals, and swimming, where the women finished 2nd in the SEC, the men finished 5th, and the men finished 6th in the NCAAs overall, while the women finished 4th nationally. So, man, what a year for Tennessee athletics. This is what Danny White had to say after Tennessee. It was announced that they've captured the 3rd straight SEC All-Sports Trophy. He said, "I'm so proud of our exceptional student athletes, coaches, and staff, as well as the unwavering support of our fans, donors here on Rocky Top. Securing the SEC All-Sports Trophy for the 3rd straight year is a testament to the dedication and hard work of everyone involved as we press forward in our journey at Tennessee. This sustained competitive excellence ignites our determination to pursue even greater accomplishments, that being, of course, national championships." So if you are the best of the best in the Southeastern Conference, men and women, everything involved, for not 1, not 2, but 3 straight seasons, 3 straight years, you got to be the best athletics director in the country, right? And we talk about the SEC just meaning more. We know that it just means more for football. We know that it just means more for softball, for women's basketball, for baseball for sure, for track and field. Men's basketball continues to get better and better in this conference. So if you're the best of the best for a sustained period of time, for 1 year, 2 years, 3 straight years, that tells me that your leader, your boss, your athletics director, and Danny White is the best in the country. And I don't think it's really even a conversation, to be completely honest with you. So that's my big takeaway. That's my big take here to begin a Wednesday show. Kind of short and sweet here. I'm sure you Tennessee fans will probably agree with me. I think Danny White's the best athletic director in the country right now. Again, not trying to say that he has made every single hire for every single coach that is having successful tenures here at Tennessee right now, but he's the boss. He creates the work environment, and he makes everything go. And he's made plenty of different hires in the athletics communications department and the athletics department overall. And this is a really, really good place to be and a really, really good place to work with and kind of look at and compare to where it's been a lot of the times over the last couple of decades, to be completely honest with you. So Danny White, the best AD in the country right now. And I don't think it's close, to be completely honest with you. Congratulations to Tennessee Athletics for a three-peat, winning the SEC All-Sports Trophy for the 3rd straight year. Hey, when we come back, Joe Healy of D1 Baseball is going to tell us all about the teams of Northern Kentucky, Indiana, and Southern Miss that comprise, along with Tennessee, the Knoxville Regional in Baseball. Really, really good interview coming up, especially if you want to be informed on what's to come here this weekend in regional play. That's coming up next with Josh Ward in segment 3 as we continue on here with a Wednesday edition of Locked On Vols. It is winner take all time in the NBA, in the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 to bet on spreads, to bet on money lines, to bet on player props, and so much more. All you have to do, just remember this, is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. It's where Americans go to bet on sporting events because it's America's #1 sports book. And there's so many different ways and avenues that you can put some coin in your pocket. Again, I talk about how I like to dabble in NASCAR on the weekends. Major League Baseball is happening right now. Run lines, money lines in other sports, spreads, individual player props where you can break it down by inning or break it down by quarter or break it down by whatever the case is in that sporting event. In NASCAR, you can break it down by, team or, teams or makes of your vehicles and all that and more. I love the prop bets because it's something unique and something that I can specifically pay attention to. And obviously I can win me some money as well. So $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon, where you can make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it is America's #1 sports book. Hey, Joe, I want to get your thoughts on the Knoxville Regional overall. Tennessee, of course, the host program here. Southern Miss, the 2. Indiana, the 3. Northern Kentucky, the 4. Overall, what do you think about Tennessee's draw and the strength of the Knoxville Regional?
It's a strong one for sure. Like, I would say it's probably, I haven't done a full ranking of it really yet, but I do think it's probably in the stronger half. I think part of that is you've got the familiarity with Southern Miss. I mean, Southern Miss has played Tennessee in the postseason. They've got a lot of carryover from that team. And Southern Miss is just a program that's not really going to be overwhelmed by a regional in general because they're there every year. So there's that. Indiana as a 3 is interesting because talent-wise, they're closer to a 2 probably. They frankly underachieved a little bit this season relative to their talent. They played a lot of tough games early in the year and won a decent bit of them. So the fact that they ended up on the bubble was actually kind of a surprise. So those two teams make it a tougher regional. I obviously, as the number 1 overall seed, you're expecting Kentucky or Tennessee to come out of it. So that's, that's where I'm at with it. But considering they are the number 1 overall seed, like it is a little bit of a tougher regional.
You look at Southern Miss, we'll kind of go team by team here. Again, like we mentioned, Tennessee just squared off with Southern Miss in the Supers last year. There are some guys who are gone, of course, the new head coach this year as well, but still some carryover with that ball club. What do they do well? And as you mentioned, this is a team that, I mean, they're in regionals every single year. I think this is their 8th straight 40-win season. It's a team that knows how to play at this stage, and I feel like obviously it's going to be one of these two teams coming out of this regional. Yeah,
I think that's fair. Southern Miss can be very familiar to Tennessee just because not only did they play them last year, it's kind of the same type of team. It's pitching, it's defense. If they don't get good pitching, they're not going to have success because they don't have the offense to kind of play catch up. And obviously that's a bad matchup stylistically for Lindsey Nelson Stadium against this Tennessee team. But the counterweight to that is that, if anyone can slow down Tennessee a little bit in this regional, it is going to be Southern Miss. Billy Oldham and Nico Mazza at the front of their rotation have both been really, really solid this year. Veteran guys who were part of last year's run as well. It'll be interesting to see how they use those guys because they're in a situation where they obviously they have to take Indiana seriously. But they're probably also thinking a little bit about what they would do pitching wise in a potential 1-0 matchup with Tennessee on Saturday. So that'll be interesting because they have those two guys, and then it's like a lot of mixing and matching, which they're comfortable doing. If you look at their stat sheet, they've got several guys relievers who have pitched a lot and pitched multiple innings. And so they're not afraid to play a bullpen game. So that is something that I think helps in regionals, but the key to Southern Miss having success in this regional is they need good starts from those top two guys. Offensively, there's some star power. Slade Wilkes is a guy with some pedigree and a guy who can run the ball out of the ballpark. Dalton McIntyre has been a nice surprise for them. Matthew Russo is a good player, but it's going to be pitching and defense for Southern Miss if they're going to have success.
You mentioned Indiana being a team that's kind of underperformed, and kind of doing my research here at the beginning of the week without diving super far deep down into it. I would somewhat agree. It does feel like Indiana is probably the more balanced team of the three in this regional, all things considered. What does Indiana? Having said that, what does Indiana kind of do well? What does Indiana hang their hat on, if so to speak?
I think it is. I think it is balanced. I mean, if anything, it's that they're a really good offensive club 1 through 9. They put a good lineup out there from top to bottom, even to the point where they have a guy in Carter Matheson who's really, by his standard, not having a great year, hitting .257. But that's a guy who also has 13 bombs. So I mean, he's a guy who's is not the focal point of this lineup right now, but can still hurt you. So that's the big thing. They've also found some things on the mound. Early in the year, that's where the struggle was. When they weren't going well, that's where they were struggling. But they've got Connor Foley as kind of their top arm in terms of starting. Ty Bothwell is a guy who can be used either way. He's got about half and half in terms of starts and relief appearances, veteran guy there. And then they've got a couple arms in the bullpen they're going to lean pretty heavily on. Like, they're another team that's not going to be afraid to go to bullpen early and often. But you're right. Your estimation of it is correct. They are a type of team that can beat you multiple ways. They don't have to do one thing well to win games. The one guy, the name that you got to watch out for is Devin Taylor. I mean, he's a guy who could play and star for basically any SEC club. I mean, he's an SEC type, high-end type of SEC player that happens to be playing it at Indiana. So if he's going well, they're going to be tough to stop offensively. And I guarantee you, Frank Anderson is spending most of his time on Indiana trying to figure out how to get that guy out.
You look at Northern Kentucky, again, a 4 seed, for most fan bases isn't going to scare anybody, and it shouldn't scare Tennessee. Having said that, though, Northern Kentucky, it's an offensive team that likes to hit. It's got, it ranks pretty highly in terms of, national rankings, top 10, in fact, and average and OBP. They're I believe, fourth in the nation, a couple behind Tennessee. No, fifth in the nation, a couple behind Tennessee with 542 runs that are scored. Having said that, they don't throw it very well. So an incredibly good offensive team for Northern Kentucky, but pitching-wise, it's probably going to be something that hurts them this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect it at best for Northern Kentucky, and this famous last words right here, Eric, but at best for Northern Kentucky, I think it's the type of team that can scare you for about 4 innings if their offense comes out hot and scores, jumps on whoever Tennessee starts in that opener and puts 3 or 4 runs on the board real quick. But then ultimately, yeah, the pitching is just not good enough based on what they've done this year to slow down Tennessee enough to I think, really put a scare in the Vols. But you nailed it. Offensively, they are pretty dynamic, and it's not just they can hit the ball out of the ballpark, but they've also stolen 125 bases, and so they're probably going to try to create some chaos. And so if you're Tennessee, you have to kind of slow your heartbeat, stay steady, understand that this is a 9-inning game, and that's the other thing about 4 seeds, they typically come out with a lot of fire and a lot of energy, and they're ready to go. You have to absorb their first punch. And as long as Tennessee can do that, I think they're going to be okay. But that first punch is probably going to come on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I remember talking to you and some others in Hoover this past weekend. And, with Tennessee pitchers, it's like the catchers don't throw anybody out, but the Tennessee pitchers as a group are so slow to the plate that you're not giving your guys a chance. And that's why you see the back picks with Cal Stark. You see the throwovers from Xander Seacrest that just slow the game down. But that's kind of Tennessee's way of managing the run game. And Friday against Northern Kentucky, we'll probably see a lot of that. You look over at the Greenville Regional. Never want to get ahead of yourself here. It's one game at a time, obviously. But the winner of the Knoxville Regional will take on the winner of the Greenville Regional. Eastern Carolina is the host program there. But as we all knew in college baseball, dating back to March, somehow Wake Forest was going to have an opportunity to play Tennessee with, of course, former starting pitcher turned reliever, turned College World Series hero Chase Burns. Wake Forest is the number 2 seed. What do you like about that Greenville Regional? And are we setting up for a Chase Burns Wake Forest reunion back at Lindsey Nelson Stadium?
It sure seems that way. No disrespect to ECU. Their ECU has questions health-wise. I'm sure some of your listeners know about the Trey Savage situation. He's their big All-American Friday night guy who had a partially collapsed lung last week, which seems not great. So thankfully, it seems like he's doing all right, just in terms of his general health. But it's like how much can we expect him to be ready to go and throw 7 innings in a regional game? We'll see. So when you consider that, they've also got a fairly tough 3 in that regional with VCU, which is a scrappy club like. And frankly, Evansville. I mean, Evansville's a team that has like a bunch of 23-year-olds. Like, it would not surprise me if Evansville is actually the team that ends up in a regional final there. So ECU, it's one of those situations where, okay, you want to host ECU, you want to be a surprise host. Well, here you go. Like, and teams like Wake Forest are what your nightmares are made of as a host, because Wake Forest is going to try to pitch off, I assume, and save Burns for a Saturday night matchup because they've got pitchers who they think could handle VCU, and they're probably right about that. So if you're ECU, you're like, great, even if we win that, we got a tough 4 with an old team, and then we're going to go to Saturday and likely have to face Chase Burns. Now, the thing with Wake Forest is that consistency has been a problem. Yeah. If this was all about high-end talent, Wake Forest would be ranked in the top 5. I mean, they're high-end guys, whether it's Burns, whether it's Nick Kurtz, whether it's Seaver King, are as good as anybody else's top-line guys. The problem is the consistency hasn't been there. The depth is not there. Their depth kind of got exposed this year, especially when guys like Nick Kurtz were injured. So it wouldn't shock me if Wake Forest goes 2-0 and looks great, and we're like, here we go. Like, here comes this matchup, and then someone else ends up winning the regional because the depth just isn't good enough. But if that depth can come through, they're a lot more dangerous in a super regional setting than they are in a regional setting, because in a super regional, you're looking at a max 3 games. They can handle that.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. The winner of the Knoxville Regional hosting the winner of the Greenville Regional. Of course, you got to take what's in front of you first and get through regional play. And Tennessee's regional is no slouch. Overall, just kind of looking at the field, kind of out the door here, Tennessee was the obvious number 1 overall seed choice. It's been, you can tell me for sure, I think it's been 25 years since the number 1 overall seed has won the whole thing. There's kind of that curse, if you will. What do you like Tennessee's chances overall? I know it's a grueling process, but it feels like you've seen Tennessee play a handful of times this year. It feels like Tennessee has the makings and the pitching has gotten deeper as the years gone on that would allow a team like the Vols to kind of be the last team standing.
Yeah, I mean, your listeners may not like to hear this if they believe in, like, if we're getting too much sunshine pumped towards us, it's a bad thing. But I turned in my picks last night, and I've got Tennessee winning the national title.
There you go.
It's the best lineup in the country. I've said that all year. A&M is like a honorable mention, right? But I've liked Tennessee's lineup all year. I think it's deeper even than the 2022 lineup. Now, 2022 had these personalities on it that are just so memorable. I think that like that stands out, but I think this group is deeper. I mean, we saw this weekend, 13, 14 position players get on the field. At this time of year, you don't see that. I mean, the number 2 overall seed, Kentucky, we saw basically 9 guys every single day. And a 10th guy, Patrick Herrera, comes off the bench. Like, Tennessee's not like that. Like, they could throw out any sort of lineup at certain positions. And we saw that this past week. The other thing, you mentioned the pitching. I think they've done it, and Tony Vitello gave kudos to Frank Anderson in his postgame after the championship game, and I think it's in part because they've done a really good job putting together a pitching staff that works with the personnel they have. I think they deserve a lot of credit for not trying to recreate Dollander, Burns, and Beam and just say, all right, who are our 3 tentpole guys that are going to go out there every weekend and just shove? I mean, you had Beam, so okay, there's one. But then beyond that, they tried some things, but they landed on this kind of weird deal where you've got an opener with Stamos and then Causey behind him. And then you've got Sechrist, who is steady, but like sometimes he gives you 6 and sometimes he gets 5 outs. And we're just going to have to understand that those starts kind of go that way sometimes. So I think they've got a really good handle on what their pitching staff does well, what it doesn't do well, and they're not trying to be something they're not on the mound, which I think takes a lot of acumen and takes a lot of willingness to have trial and error, because I think a lot of coaches would have looked at that pitching staff in a traditional way and seen the talent, because there's plenty of talent there, and would have seen that talent and just tried to kind of shove a square peg in a round hole. And when I think Frank has done a really nice job of just saying, look, it is what it is. We're gonna win this way, and they have.
Hey, Josh, we kind of talked about that everything school a little bit last year, and that's what Danny White loves to phrase and coin, and there's some validity to it, and even more validity coming yesterday whenever Tennessee won the SEC All-Sports title for the 3rd straight year. Pretty impressive stuff going on right now in Rocky Top.
No doubt, it's across the board, and it's the sports that we talk about the most. It's the sports that don't get a whole lot of attention. Throughout the athletic department, there are a lot of really good things that are happening right now, and that is accompanied by conference championships. Tennessee is trying to take the next step and go win a national title, and baseball is going to have an opportunity to do that. Softball had a chance, fell short with the loss in the Super Regional. Tennessee football will go in at least trying to make the playoff. National championship would still feel like a reach to me, but the football program is in a really good position, and we can keep going on down the list to talk about these other sports that have been so competitive, both at the highest level in the SEC and trying to go for a national title. So it's really impressive where things are with Tennessee athletics right now, and the investment that we're seeing into the major sports as well as throughout the athletic department tell me that Tennessee will have a chance to keep this going. Maybe not at the very top of the SEC year in, year out, but being competitive at the top of the SEC every year.
Trying to be competitive once again in basketball, and Rick Barnes has done a really nice job of assembling this roster with some returners and trying to keep some guys on the roster, and of course getting some guys from the transfer portal. It looks like that final piece of the big picture puzzle was instilled over the weekend. Late Friday evening, it was Chaz Lanier finally committing to the University of Tennessee, and boy, I know we talked a lot about Chaz Lanier a ton over the last month or so, but it's a really good get for Tennessee to beat out Kentucky, albeit new head coach. I get it, but still Kentucky to beat out BYU. And you might be kind of saying, well, what's it take to beat out BYU? Well, they were offering a whole lot more money. And in this day and age, Tennessee kind of came in 3rd place in that regard. But still, Chaz Lanier comes to Tennessee. Tennessee's got a chance to be good again next year. On paper, a really good ball club. Of course, they got to come together.
Right. Chemistry, team building, playing roles, all of that has to be shown. Player development, both with guys coming back to Tennessee and newcomers. Felix Akpar is a newcomer that needs to take his game to the next level. Tennessee's coaching staff will try to help with that. Chaz Lanier has to show that he can be a big-time scorer against much tougher competition than what he faced in the A-Sun. But adding Chaz Lanier, a shooter, a guy that can score at all levels, helps replace Dalton Connect, a guy that can shoot from the outside and score at all levels. Darlington DeBar is a guy that can help shoot from the outside. Igor Milicic, I'm very intrigued to see his role in the offense as a stretch big man, something that we haven't seen in Rick Barnes' offense at Tennessee. So all of that collectively coming together with Zakai Ziegler as a leader at point guard, Jemai Mashak talking about the culture publicly and recruiting these guys to Tennessee, making sure they understand what Tennessee is about. That's another reason to feel optimistic about how the newcomers will fit in with what Tennessee is trying to build. And then young players, how they develop, the difference we see in Estrella and Carr from last year to this upcoming season are reasons to be intrigued. So how it all comes together, how Tennessee matches up with top teams in the SEC are questions to be answered. But on paper, the roster that has been put together is an SEC title contender again, and a team that will have aspirations again of trying to reach the Final Four.
So Tennessee basketball going to be an SEC title for sure next year, a contender in that SEC title conversation. Tennessee baseball right now in the conversation, as are 64 other teams, but in the conversation to be the national champion this year. Tennessee was the number 1 overall seed, and we spoke with Joe Healy of D1 Baseball earlier before you joined the show, and he said there at the end, like, hey, I don't know if your listeners want to hear this, but Tennessee's my pick to win the national championship. Obviously, Tennessee's the number 1 overall seed, so it's not like that's a huge stretch, but boy, this team is good, and it feels like it's peaking at the right time.
Yeah, they might win it. They're the number 1 overall seed, which brings the curse conversation. It is funny how often we talk about, well, is the national media going to give credit? Is it going to give proper respect? And then you start to hear people picking your team, and it can create fear. Oh, that scares me a little bit. I don't think that affects Tony Vitello or his players. We, of course, have the potential storylines that can come into the super regional with all the Wake Forest talk that is there and talk of Chase Burns. But, the way I look at it, Tennessee has a lineup that we know can hit. Tennessee has veterans that have been a part of a team with big-time expectations and a pitching staff that I think has overcome odds to be in the position that it's in throughout this season, dealing with injury, having to replace Chase Burns from last year's team, along with Dolander, of course, off last year's squad. And it's a program that is just used to being in this kind of position, whether we're talking about being a number 1 seed or having big expectations, big goals of getting to Omaha and competing in the College World Series. So I love Tennessee's chances to come out of the regional. I'm going to like Tennessee's chances in the super regional, assuming the Vols are there hosting in the next round, which should be the case. And then if they get to Omaha, it's tough for anybody that's there. But if you're there, you've got a shot. And Tennessee's the number 1 overall seed for a reason. They kept winning games when other teams that had a shot to get it done couldn't do it.
Of course, you want to take it one game at a time. Of course, that's how Tony Vitello, that's how he talks to us. I mean, that's how he talks to his team, and that's what should happen. Because, I mean, you make a regional, you're a good ball club, all right? So, I mean, anything can happen. But, 1999 Miami. I mean, literally, that's the last time that a number 1 overall seed has won the College World Series final. I mean, it's silly and all that type of stuff because one year doesn't correlate to the next year, but I mean, it's been forever. So, I mean, it's worth, spending some time to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, it's confusing. I mean, how do we go a quarter century without the number 1 team winning? Because the number 1 team is supposed to be the best one going in. The team 2 years ago had conversations around it of, could this be the best team ever? Then to make the College World Series. So I don't have a good explanation of how it's happened other than sports are funny and baseball is especially that way when we get to this time of year. But I also think about the team 2 years ago. They had so much pressure. I don't think this team gets the same kind of outside pressure. They're still the number 1 overall seed. They're still going to get a ton of attention, favorites to win the title. I recognize all that. But there was a lot more that followed that team 2 years ago than I think has with this year's team. It's also a different team, different leaders, different personalities. So if they do get to Omaha or they don't, if they do win the national title or they don't, I don't think it has anything to do with whether they're the number 1 seed or whether they're not. I think it's they'll win it because they do, or if they don't, it's because pitching will have fallen short at some point, or the bats will have gone cold, which is the same concern that the 2 seed and the 3 seed on down the list have going into this tournament.
I think that's a really, really good point. And, my job is to cover Tennessee baseball on the #beat. And so I've kind of, we've had the conversation about 2022 and 2024 and everything. And if I was doing my job, I would have said what you said a long time ago. We like to compare these two teams because, home runs and number 1 in the country and number 1 overall seed and all this type of stuff, hosting and sweeping conference titles. But I don't think that this team has as much pressure on it because, that team was walking the walk, talking the talk, walking the walk, but everybody in the country was just waiting for Tennessee to slip up. And when Tennessee slipped up, everybody piled on. Sure, that's going to happen regardless, but that team, they were kind of setting themselves up to, okay, when we slip, it's going to be pretty bad. This team isn't necessarily in that same conversation. That 2022 team was talked about maybe being the best ever assembled, in the regular season at least. And this team's really, really good, and this team leads the nation in home runs and is like top 5 in ERA, but it's not kind of in that conversation. So I think that's a really good point, Josh. You astute little journalist, not as much pressure on this year's team, and maybe that makes the difference.
Yeah, I think even the Tennessee fan base, after A.J. Russell went down and going into the season, they didn't have that kind of hype. And you could look at the top 10 and see a few SEC teams ahead of Tennessee. And the thought at one point this year was, okay, we're going to be good. Maybe we'll make Omaha. But there wasn't a whole lot of national title talk that was taking over earlier in the season. Of course, it was also happening while the basketball team was on its run, winning the SEC and trying to go to the Final Four, making the Elite Eight. So the baseball team was kind of able to just work itself out. And it lost that opening SEC series and had a few individual game losses because they won every series from there on out. But I think they had some individual games that caused caution in building up this team. And then all of a sudden it just kept winning series and then ends up winning the regular season championship and then what it did in the tournament. And now we're really having the conversation of, hey, they're the number 1 seed. They might go win it all. But I don't think that conversation has been there for 2 to 3 months like it was with the team 2 years ago.
And Josh, when you continually pile series victories over series victories over series victory, usually means you're a pretty good ball club, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's simple, but they have just kept winning. I did not think they were going to win the SEC tournament. And I'm not saying that because of what the odds were going in, that it's just difficult to be the one team coming out. I wasn't sure their approach would be that. I thought it would be more of, okay, let's go down there and play, and the guys that are out there are going to play their best, but probably we're going to come up short. When they lost game 1, I thought, okay, not a big deal. They're not going to go win the SEC tournament. That's fine. It was not going to affect my thoughts of what they could do in the NCAA tournament. But just like they did in the regular season when they won their final 9 SEC series, they kept winning games, and they were beating teams that were out there really looking to go win the SEC tournament. And that says something. If Tennessee could not be at its best in terms of optimizing lineup and pitching plans and all of that, and it still won the SEC tournament, I think that says something about what this team is capable of.
Josh, what's coming up the rest of the week on the show with you and VFL Jason Swain, noon to 3 on 99.1 The Sports Animal?
Everything that's going on with Tennessee. So reaction to Chaz Lanier. We had Ron Slay. We did a off-season sleigh ride. He hopped on for a segment to react to Lanier and this portal class that Tennessee's put together. We're getting ready for the baseball tournament. Recruiting is a hot topic with Tennessee football and getting ready for the football season. So every day, 12 to 3, we're talking Tennessee, and every Friday we have the Josh and Swain newsletter. Encourage you to subscribe. Appreciate everybody that has done that, by the way. joshandswain.com to sign up, or the link that Eric provides you.
Josh, as always, man, appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, that is going to do it here for this edition of Locked On Vols here on a Wednesday. Had a whole lot of fun. Couple of really good guests on. Josh Ward, of course, for Ward Wednesday each and every single Wednesday. Joe Healy from D1 Baseball, providing some great insight on some of the teams that comprise the Knoxville Regional, all that and more as we continue on to get closer to first pitch coming up on Friday for the Knoxville Regional. All right, when we come back here on a Thursday, we'll talk more Tennessee hoops. We'll talk Tennessee football, Tennessee recruiting, all that and more. Your number one place to find Tennessee football information, 30 minutes, maybe 32, 33 minutes or less right here every single day. It's Locked On Vols. Thanks, guys, so much for listening, and we'll do it again tomorrow. This is Locked On Vols.